everybody, and welcome to another episode of Unsubscribe, the Demand Drive podcast. I am your co-host, AJ Alonso, joined by my co-host, Alex Ellison. He's here every single time. You know him, you love him. How you doing, Alex?
I'm good. I feel like you normally introduce yourself as a host and then me as the co-host. So this is...
We're
Well, so
doing the same work.
Did you demote yourself? Is that what just happened?
I did, yeah.
Okay. All right. So I'm doing great then, yeah.
Alex, we are joined by a fantastic guest today, Jake Bernstein. He's the Director of Business Development at SPINS. Jake, how are you today?
I'm doing fantastic. It's great to be with you guys today.
Awesome. I love hearing fantastic. That's always good.
Terrific is another riff on that I like. Underused.
I agree. You tell someone that you're terrific, it's like, oh, that's a word I don't hear all that often.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Well, Jake, before we actually get into the conversation, going to be about systems integration, living that meshed life, as we called it in our pre-show. Let's give the audience an idea of who you are. Give them the Jake Bernstein 101. What do you do? Where do you work? What does your day-to-day look like? You know, the full history of what we're looking at.
Absolutely. So I'm the Director of Business Development for SPINS today. I actually lead a BDR team here at SPINS. That's a team of about 8 reps today. Prior to SPINS, I was actually a member of a company called ClearCut Analytics that was acquired by SPINS. And before that, was employee number 1 and wore all sales and marketing hats at a company called Bonfire based out of St. Louis. So, you know, my day-to-day is working with BDRs, coaching, training, enable them, but also figuring out how we can be a key arbiter in pipeline growth and bookings growth within the SPINS organization. And, you know, what gets me excited every day is, you know, helping BDRs put plays in action that lead to good outcomes and helping them do that replicably and at scale. Another tough word there. Yeah.
Replicable is a word that I regularly struggle with.
Yeah. Based in Chicago, by the way, from Tampa, Florida. We were talking about sports before this call. Huge Tampa Bay sports fan, so feel free to connect with me about that.
Oh, This is going to take a turn because the Lightning have been the bane of my existence as a Bruins fan for a while.
Yeah.
Woof. All right, off on the wrong foot. Cool. So you mentioned that you just went through an acquisition. ClearCut was acquired by SPINS. You're living that meshed life, so to speak. As someone who leads a team of BDRs, I really want to dig into and make sort of the focus of the conversation what that looks like. Communicating that sort of transition and change to the team that you have, helping them understand what their future is going to look like, and from your perspective as a leader, how do you kind of navigate all of that? So talk to me about sort of that process, what it looks like, how you communicated the news.
This happened about 12 months ago now to this point, a little bit more. And I think from day one, what I thought was really important is to ensure that we were communicating the big picture first and foremost. You know, why is this happening? And then what's in it for you, right? Almost like how we would treat a prospect or a buyer. And, you know, what came along with that though is, well, what's in it for you? Like, is my job safe? Is, you know, our path forward secure? Am I going to have to be, you know, subservient to some other function or product or business line? And, you know, at first there was a lot of gray area there. We weren't really sure. You know, we had been closely in talks with management at kind of the legacy company, but how that then cascaded down to the functional level seemed to change almost every day. So, you know, we communicate something, we get a little more information, we say information's coming. I try to write down as much as possible. Not just from day one in terms of what it means for the company, but also what it means for them in terms of a BDR or SDR role. We want to keep everyone happy. We want to keep everyone excited. But there was certainly kind of this like big range of emotions from fear to uncertainty and doubt, but also excitement at the same time. So that's kind of what like the first 15 days, 2 weeks looked like.
Yeah, it's a little snapshot of what, I can imagine like that first couple of weeks is also so crucial for someone who does think like, is my job secure? What is my next tomorrow, week, month going to look like? Because a lot of like, you're talking about somebody's livelihood. So you want to make sure that you kind of let them know everything's cool. But like to that point, you want to make sure that you still kind of keep that momentum that you've had prior, pushing forward so that it isn't just like, things are changing on the day, hang back, figure out what's going on. Like you still have a job to do, right? And I'm still here leading you and we're still driving pipeline for the business.
Yeah. And I think to an extent, it was important we do keep that momentum, you know, in part maybe to validate like why we were doing, you know, are we the right fit, you know, for this company to an extent too. But I think for reps, right, there was also some upside in that, hey, we're now part of a larger company organization. There's some things that come along with that wouldn't maybe at smaller, scrappy startup. could be employee benefits, could be some growth path development and other job opportunities that open up that maybe we would not have otherwise had, or they would have. And so there's some positives that I think were communicated as part of that too.
Yeah, no, that's really, you go ahead.
I was just saying, you got to spin the positives, no pun intended on the name.
Yeah, right.
Just realized what I said. But spinning the positives as part of like, I know this is a difficult transition, change-based time, but like, look at all these things that we get access to now. That's kind of reassuring somebody.
Definitely.
Yeah. I'm kind of curious about some specific details. So in those 2 weeks, were you get acquired, and then do you immediately have to change all your messaging, change your scripts, like what you're sending out? Do you even have to write messages to tell like mid-cadence prospects? What happens really on that like ground level for SDRs as all this stuff is happening above them?
Alex, interesting, because I actually got married. Our company was formally acquired the next day, and then I went on my honeymoon for 2 weeks. So all these talking points that I had prepared, I was hoping were delivered to, my team and the rest of our company. Once I got back though, right, in terms of scripts, messaging and the like, I think where we found some conflict at first was, hey, we're actually reaching out to some of the exact same targets, though they are customers of kind of the legacy company, whereas they are prospects for us. And so there was some collisions there, between BDRs and SDRs and reps at the legacy company. It's not that messaging changed, but I think it was evolving. And so I think because of where there were differences in, I guess, the buyer journey, customer versus prospect, it was really tough to navigate. And so from a BDR standpoint, they're saying, hey, I'm getting either comped on meetings or meetings that turned into op. My TAM has essentially been sacrificed, right? My segment. And so there were some things that dealt with like personality types in there, some comp, questions and jeopardizing there. So that was really tough. I think we then worked with kind of the broader commercial team to say, great, let's have cohesive messaging from both sides, and eventually let's come together too. But that was really tough out of the gate to navigate those waters.
You picked a good time to get married. It sounds
yeah, exactly. Right. I was sending LinkedIn requests. I was joking with someone at lunch. I was sending LinkedIn connection requests while on my honeymoon. And I even had said that in my LinkedIn personalization requests, and still a joke to this day. So I guess I made an impression, but
like, hey, we're going to be working together currently on a honeymoon. I'll see you in 2 weeks.
Yeah. They're like, why are you connecting with me?
So I guess, the lens really that I wanted to kind of take from looking at sort of the process of like integrating systems, going through mergers and acquisitions is kind of what we refer to as the big three: people, process, and technology. And it sounds like process wise, there were some things right off the bat that were kind of difficult to navigate in terms of like, well, we had messaging going out to customers of the legacy company that like, we're shrinking the TAM of our individual reps. They feel like they're being kind of hamstrung in some capacity. When it came to other processes that like existed internally within ClearCut before you got acquired, in terms of routing and stuff like that, things that like make your team go, things that ensure that they are successful, how did you either like 50-50 integrate that with what kind of existed with the legacy company? Did you just change everything and kind of adopt new systems and processes? Like, how was that process like?
Yeah. So for example, we used HubSpot as our CRM when we were at ClearCut, and we used Salesforce at SPINS. And I kept my SDR team of 3 essentially in their continued motion, same tools, process, and systems, just because disrupting it, in Q3 and Q4 was going to disrupt any momentum that we had. And at the same time, I was working with sort of the finance, ops, and Salesforce teams to actually take all of our CRM records, export it from HubSpot and import it into Salesforce and map all of the fields and the like, right? So there's what felt like 3,000 micro decisions I needed to make, from what fields were going to come over, what records, how they were labeled. I didn't even know how I was going to map to SPINS world. And so I kind of shielded my team from that and let them keep operating with existing tech stack and the like. And sort of by the end of the year, we were in a better spot. At the same time, we were accountable for making our pipeline visible to the rest of the commercial team and org. And I was had to do that, but rely on my other reps to say, well, make sure your stuff's accurate in HubSpot, I'll figure out a way to generate a port so they can use it in Salesforce, or at least some sort of commonality across CRMs. That was pretty tough, but kept the momentum with the BDRs is kind of the key takeaway there.
I like that. I feel like that change or that opportunity for change is something that a lot of people will like sink into. And like for you moving from HubSpot to Salesforce, Alex, you can speak to what Salesforce migrations look like in terms of just getting data from one instance to another. It's a pain in the butt. But a lot of times, you know, you might look back at something like that and go like, well, that was worth it. Like we made a positive change. Granted, it was a huge investment from like leadership and management's perspective, but overall, it's something that we should have been doing anyways, or something that needed to get upgraded in the first place. Thinking about someone who might be going through a process like this, or is in sort of the throes of an acquisition, could you speak at all towards like the positive outlook on well, some stuff internally that is legacy that sucks, frankly, has the opportunity to get updated and changed in a way that might make everything easier for everyone?
Right. I think there's a couple things that come to mind. Number one is I sort of sold the benefit of having to use Salesforce as, look, you're going to be way more marketable and dangerous if you know two of the core CRMs in the market, you know, front to back eventually. And, you know, that's skills you can take with you wherever you go. I think the second part is there were some, for example, close loss reason. I don't know if it was a field that we had at the opportunity level in Salesforce, and that's now part of kind of our CRM journey. And so there were some learnings, I would say, you know, between intra companies, right, in terms of how we could operationalize some of our systems and CRM use in particular. But I think that marketability of, hey, you're more well-versed in two systems or three or four or five now than just one, will make you more well-rounded in terms of your tech stack understanding and, you know, how else you might fit in another company down the road too.
Yeah, and I like the theme I'm sort of picking up on here is you did a really good job of finding the positives in a merger, in an acquisition, that I feel like a lot of people just overlook. I feel like most people are like, my company got acquired. Now I have to do all of this extra work. I have no time for it. Or like my job's not safe. There are a lot of really easy things to fall onto of like negatives. It's not going well. This is terrible. I have a lot of complaints. But yeah, that just really speaks to, I think, an important factor of managing SDRs or BDRs and being able to say like, hey, you might hear all this going on, but in reality, even if this specific short-term experience isn't good, maybe you do get fired, maybe you leave, whatever happens, you're still going to get something out of this that is positive, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, you know, culturally, right, I know that was one of the things we talked about pre-show is, you know, we I think have a very inclusive culture here at Spins. And, you know, there's sort of a broadening of, say, if you're BDR at a company of 20 or 30 and now you're one at 400 or 500, you're expanding your network literally overnight, especially to other sales folks that you can learn from, obviously jobs that you could potentially have, and likely other functions and verticals within a company that you would not otherwise get exposed to. So, Alex, that was another benefit that I tried to espouse from sort of a culture perspective.
Yeah. And there's like, not even just, I guess, culturally speaking, there are things that like you've always done at ClearCut or at any company that's sort of getting acquired by another organization. And there's that like mentality of like, oh, we're like low process, very casual. We route leads this way and it works for us. And then you kind of have to put the positive spin on like, well, now we're a high process company and there's a very defined way that we route leads and you have this territory and that's like the way it is now.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people might object to that with like, well, that's not how we've done things. And so combating that, I'm sure, is incredibly difficult for you, but like it kind of rolls up under that culture, right? Of like, maybe you were more of that startup scale up type organization and you did things one way and then you get bumped up to enterprise level and
right.
bureaucratic. And that
difficult. Yeah, that certainly I think came to light, and even just acknowledging, you know, territories and segments and, you know, owned accounts and the like, where not necessarily, you know, very present at ClearCut. And I think a lot of it was education. A lot of it is, you know, hey, we need to dive deeper and help you understand the broader sales strategy and the structure beneath it, rather than just, you know, here's kind of the large market that we're going after. We do have an ICP, but that's it. And that took a lot of time as well. And I also, AJ, think that this came to light in kind of the hiring process too. So, you know, at one company, we're looking for high emphasis on either self-starters, right? They might have some skill sets as it relates to having been a BDR before, but now needed to be newly defined at the larger company, and especially some of those hiring processes too. Like interviews were different. We have, staffing and recruiters, on site or in office or part of the staff. We're used to that too. So, both in terms of how do I fit into this sales structure and how do I fit into kind of this HR and talent structure too, was all new.
Yeah. From your perspective, I'm sure that was at times both frustrating and a breath of fresh air, like knowing that you have sort of these new expectations around like someone who might succeed in like the Wild West sort of way of going about sales is going to be very different from someone who succeeds in a more structured environment. So like having to shift all of that on your side of things is difficult, but at the same time, you have resources now, like you said, talent and hiring managers to kind of help go through that with you. So you're not your reps aren't the only ones going through growing pains. Like you,
right.
Someone who manages those reps have to deal with a lot of that as well.
Yeah. And I think as a manager, if I'm putting myself in the shoes of BDRs that I lead or manage, I want to shield them from some of the learning curve associated with being part of a kind of larger company now. And again, try to help them do their job as best they can without maybe some of the baggage or the confusion or just the questions. And so being empathetic, at every stage of this integration and ongoing was kind of an attribute that I wanted to make sure came through. Alex, to the point of being positive, that was part of the mix too.
Yeah, for sure. Something you said when you mentioned, obviously, like they grow their networks by just having SDRs at the company that acquired you. It might be less specific to SDRs, but maybe for someone in your role, like a director or a manager, did you have a counterpart at the company that acquired you? And like, what were your interactions with them like? Was there any like tension? I don't know, things in that area.
I don't know if I had an exact counterpart, in part because sort of the first 6 months of the integration for me were driving kind of what we had going forward, driving, either revenue or momentum specifically for ClearCut and figuring out CRM migration, the like. Mm-hmm. And so actually stepped into a new role that, hadn't really been there before. The person managing BDRs prior, right, there was momentum there, but not necessarily super in-depth structure, process systems and the like. I did approach it as, I do want to learn what you have been doing and what's working, and so I can build on that. So that was kind of a foundational conversation, but stylistically very different, right? Not just because I'd just been joining Spins for, 3-6 months, but their experience over the last, 5 or 10 years and, an entrenched reputation at the company too. So that was interesting for me to navigate.
Yeah. You mentioned something about shielding reps as sort of like that management level and sort of stepping into this role where you are keeping the momentum with ClearCut, but also building towards that integration spins. Obviously, it seems like you took on a lot of that because you wanted to sort of help reps keep that momentum, but like most of it also kind of just fell on you based on what you said. Like you were the guy for the job. Mm-hmm. It shouldn't be that, like, at least in my mind, I feel like it's great for someone to step up and do that, but there's something that reps can do to sort of like meet you halfway, right? Like they should be able to make your job easier because you're eventually making their job easier. Mm-hmm. What are some examples of things that like you experienced or what you might have heard coming from like the individual contributor level, where if they're going through a process like this, they can sort of help speed things along or make things easier for everyone by working closely with management, by making sure everyone's kind of rowing the boat in the same direction. Like how can an IC do that?
Yeah, I think part of it is, make one-on-ones really easy, meaning, if you are responsible for reporting on a certain level of KPIs, make that easy on your manager to interpret and review and act upon with you. I think secondarily is, let's say that either developing sequences and, content and messaging is something that maybe would typically fall on me, see if they can run with it on their own and then apply it and get it out to market with, maybe a little more expediency or less reliance on me to review. I think some of those things just to like keep the boat, rowing in the same direction. And even such as, hey, if I'm forgetting that we should, go out to lunch or go out to dinner or do something celebratory, like bring those things to light, because it might just be something that's, way down on the priority list that, I might not be remembering. So find small ways to keep the culture going there too.
I like that. It's like an easy way to not feel like you're, as at least that I see, like just a cog in the machine, right? Especially if you do go from like that 40-person company to a 400-person company, you feel like you can get lost amongst the rest of the BDRs there. But keeping that culture of the 40-person company afloat with these little things, I think, is so important, not just like to keep yourself sane, but to keep your manager sane and sort of help them make the transition a lot smoother.
Yeah, we kept our Slack channels, even though we're a team shop, the legacy company, and just keeping this semblance of those channels going, or, having kind of our ClearCut culture there, kept positivity flowing. And I would say, we continue to share pictures of our day-to-day lives, or, what remote work or culture was like. And that just kept kind of a constant sun shining in one capacity or another.
And it's just like, hey, look over here. We got pictures of dogs. I know it's tough. I know it's difficult right now. Still have the dogs channel. That's super important. I feel that on a personal level for sure.
Yeah. You got it. I mean, I don't have a dog. I only see dogs in the dogs channel. I need it.
Oh, funny.
I'm sort of curious, because obviously you know how the merger or acquisition went on the sales side of things. Did other org or parts of the organization have sort of different challenges or more problems integrating themselves that you sort of saw? And were you able to kind of pick out any, look at their mistakes and learn from those without having to go through those yourself while you were going through this whole process?
I think to an extent. I think the challenge there, Alex, is because it's a much larger organization, simply didn't have near the level of visibility I would at a 40-person company, though I would like to, right? I'm sort of one, as evidenced by me checking in on my honeymoon, right? What's going on? I would like as much visibility into something that I possibly can. But I don't know if I had a lot of exposure. I think that now at an organization with significantly more products, right? It's the services that go along with it. It was hard for me to even grasp kind of just the depth of that compared to, one or two core products or initiatives. So I wish I could say I could have, and maybe that's, advice to give to the audience of, go have either coffee chats with our leaders, functionally or otherwise, or understand, what life is like when, a new organization comes in the wing from, say, product perspective or client success. And in tandem, right, that's also building network in a more proactive way within the larger company too.
I really like that idea of having coffee chats with sort of other internal stakeholders. It's something that we've talked about on this show before for reps specifically. Like, one of the easiest ways to upskill yourself as an SDR is to ask questions, to open yourself up to those conversations with either other reps or people just totally outside your point of view that can maybe teach you something or give you advice on something that you might not get from like a direct peer. And I think similarly for business unit leaders, like, you can do the same thing, especially in a merger. Like, you want to meet the people that you're now working together with. And so having that opportunity, even for just 10 minutes in the morning, once a day, if you can, for like different business unit leaders, to talk with them and just pick their brains and understand, like, what was the culture like beforehand? What do you do that we now are going to start doing? It really like arms you and prepares you for that change, while also making you a familiar face, kind of making you like easy to root for in a way. That's a huge thing, right? Like, if you're someone who puts yourself out there and they're like, oh, this Jake guy, I like him, you're probably going to get more favorable treatment as you do integrate into the company and start to become more of a cohesive organization rather than we're here merging in.
I think that's a good call. Though I had kind of a front man type of role in our office here in Chicago when there were 40 people, I kind of wanted to be like the guy as we went through the integration too, whether that was just making sure I was someone who could make sure our team shows up at like the happy hour that, was there. But in a world of now being in hybrid work where we're in the office here 2 or 3 days a week, I wanted to make sure that I was around the water cooler having that type of dialogue, that, if I was on the large commercial call and had even a brief role, 3 to 5 minutes, that I made it count. and so that people could come to me and trust me. And I think personally that might have helped in being available for the role that opened up to lead the BDR team now for the combined company. And I would urge or recommend that those at kind of the functional level, be it SDRs, BDRs, or whatever, do that as well, right? Make yourself visible and marketable in the process.
Yeah. Selling yourself is sometimes the hardest thing you can do, but like, it's funny. It's a lot of it, like selling yourself is a lot easier in most cases, realistically, than being an SDR reaching totally out cold to like this CRO of a Fortune 500 company. I would rather sell myself every day.
Yeah.
But for some people, it is so difficult to be able to like talk yourself up, to have those 3 to 5 minutes and really make them count. Like that's more difficult than being like, yeah, I'll run a discovery call for like Nike. Sure. Why not?
Yeah. Right. And I also think that, there is a little bit of consideration around shiny new objects, whether that's, our company might have been the newest thing, right, that is sellable to the field. And I think there's two sides of that. That's, wow, I can't wait to get my hands on that and get it out to my prospects and customers. And then it's also, well, I understand you're the new kid on the block, but, we still had, this thing going on, or we have legacy products and services that make you secondary. So I think it's up to leadership in that respect to level the playing field, both from selling perspective as well as kind of acknowledgement of who is part of the company and who's now, as part of one company.
The last thing, I know we talked about people, we talked about process, the last part of that big three, technology. I think this is maybe the most understood portion of the three when it comes to mergers and acquisitions in terms of like what stays and what goes. You talked about, for example, kind of making that move from HubSpot to Salesforce because legacy company had Salesforce. Is that the case for like every bit of or piece of technology that you had, or is it more like would you fight for something, I guess, if like you were using a different lead routing system or a marketing automation system, but you're like, no, like we refuse to work unless we have access to XYZ. We will crumble without it. Like, does it get democratic, or is it still like, we acquired you, listen to us?
At first it was, this is the way, and this shift needs to happen. But what I learned, I think, over the better part of the last 6 months is we may have to more formally create a business case around it or what have you, but there's an openness to tools that we didn't have prior and could have more utility, not just for 3 or 4 people, but 40 or 50. There's a different level of kind of advocacy that needs to happen internally versus me going to one person saying, I need this, cost this, can we make it happen? But that's good learning for me, right? And I was actually talking to one of the sales reps today. I said, I now understand the buyer journey better now, kind of being a champion or a buyer compared to, on the other side. I've been an IC in my world too. But I think there's an openness to different tools and systems, but the way in which you go about either seeking approval for them or what have you is definitely different. A different type of challenge to afford, I would say, because, there might be a series of people helping implement it, whereas it was just you before, or, there wasn't so much integration required technically. So I think that's been interesting, but it was more of an upgrade for us going from, say, one sales engagement tool to another, the second one being more robust, right? So that was a positive there too.
Yeah, it's like, I find it, I talk with a lot of people who like love specific pieces of technology, and they make that claim of like, I'd be lost without it. Mm-hmm. So it's always interesting to like, can you bring that perspective into the company you're merging with? But maybe they just don't know about it, or it's like,
right,
we've been using Pardot for the past 15 years, and this is all we know. So you're coming in and using Pardot, and it's like, but you haven't had the time or luxury of examining like some of the newer players in the space that might do things differently. So being able to bring that perspective, I think, sort of adds value to the point you were talking about before, like making yourself a known entity, being able to come in and like make those 3 to 5 minutes count. Like having a good tech recommendation can really give yourself a bit of a boost in the eyes of like new leadership.
Right. And if you're a BDR that, let's say, is just a prospecting whiz, and the way they create campaigns or use, Sales Navigator a certain way or some combination, right? Look at all these incredible ways I leverage triggers in my outreach. you become a bit of a shining star, and all of a sudden, you're teaching and enabling others. And whether or not your organization has full scale enablement teams or not, you can play that role. Again, makes you a little bit more marketable. Career opportunities may then open up otherwise because of you showcasing your craft when maybe you didn't have as much of a platform before.
Yeah, that's really cool. I like that idea.
Yeah.
As an IC, being able to like spread your wings a little bit. Like, I've been doing this for months. How do you people not know about this?
Right. Yeah. And I think it's just, you can fall into either patterns or habits because, maybe that's the way it's done. And, we hadn't thought about it because we're a larger commercial org, but I like to use the word scrappy, right? It's like that scrappy way of bringing startup-like skills that are needed there to maybe a company with a larger brand equity and reputation. You put that mix together and you can really drive some good results.
Yeah, I really like that. I know we're sort of low on time here, but I was curious to jump back to the people thing a little bit. And because you did such a good job of painting everything in a positive light, but I'm sure there were challenges, right? What would you say was maybe the most difficult thing to deal with, dealing with SDRs who, right, we're going through these, I'm nervous, I'm scared, I don't know what's happening. And were there any people that just didn't pick up on it, just were like, you know what, I'm done, I'm out? Or were you able to sort of keep the whole team, convince everyone that it is a positive thing?
I think we kept the whole team going for the most part. I think where, rubber started to meet the road was, this is great for now. What does my next step look like from a career development standpoint? And on the one hand, at a startup, I would say harder to identify that specific path. You're going to be a BDR for 12 months, and then you're going to go to senior BDR or AE. Typically that doesn't have a ton of clarity depending on, the size and scale you're at of a startup. As you go to a larger company, but it's a brand new function, there's some similarities to where that career pathing was at too. And so while more functions are opened up or other departments, could open its doors and have new roles, the ability for, an IC to prove themselves probably goes backwards, 6 or 12 months, restarts the clock, if you will. And so I think that was the hardest part. And, morale and I think motivation suffered a little bit for some, but worked itself out, over the course of time. Some other opportunities opened up, and I'm very proud that all three of the reps that I had managed at ClearCut now have different roles here at SPINS. So that's sort of like a shining light for me as I look, 15 months later or so.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. Not all roses. That's a good call out. It's easy to look at this and go look at all the cool benefits you get with mergers and acquisitions and all of this opportunity and the ways that you can spin it in a positive light. And then underneath that, it's but it's hard. And there are things that just don't work, and people will be frustrated. So it's never, I would assume, a smooth transition start to finish. There's always going to be bumps in the road, but it sounds like you were able to navigate those bumps pretty well.
Yeah. And I think that being adaptable is part of it. And that's what you learn at a startup, right? Is revenue model might change, our product might not work, all these things that you just have to kind of tough it out each day. It's just doing it at a different level, as you go through an integration or acquisition.
A very good point. As we wrap the conversation up, I want to see if there's a single point that you can give the audience, or a big takeaway in terms of somebody who might be going through this today, somebody who just recently went through an acquisition, might be in your shoes from 15 months ago, and they're trying to figure out how to make their reps happy, how to impress leadership. One big takeaway that someone listening to this episode might be able to bring back and make some positive change at their organization.
Yeah. Building a little bit on that adaptability comment. So being adaptable and open-minded and saying, hey, there's ways that you are typically used to operating or leading or managing or executing, but be mindful that there's also another way, and finding ways to fuse those things together as best you can will keep you sane, but also help you get a leg up on the next step. So adaptability and open-minded is a bit of a mental framework there, but applying that to situations that you find you're in as you go through the thick of it.
And that's just good advice in general. The more adaptable and open-minded you are, the better you're going to be probably in any situation that you find yourself in. So not just for mergers and acquisitions and systems integration, but in life in general.
Yeah, it's like being adaptable to sports fandom, right? You gotta be able to tolerate, lightning fandom when we're on a call like this.
Yeah, that's it's been gritting through the past half an hour-ish.
AJ,
How you won many a cup.
you're a Patriots fan. I do this.
I know that's true.
You.
The tough part is that I've experienced quite a lot of success in my life on the sports side of things. So it's hard. Man, it's just hard looking down from the top of the mountain, guys. Let me tell you how difficult this is. No. Jake, thanks so much for being here, for shedding some light on your situation and generalizing it a bit for our audience so they can learn systems integration, mergers, acquisitions, if they might be going through this. If people want to learn more about you, about SPINS, about anything we talked about today, continue the conversation, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, I'd say reach out to me on LinkedIn. Jake Bernstein's the name there. My email is jbernstein@spins.com and our website, www.spins.com. And feel free to shoot me a message. Always like talking about this stuff or otherwise. And it's great being with y'all.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks again for being here. Thank you, listener, for listening as always. Remember to subscribe to unsubscribe, get more insight and advice like this in your inbox. We'll see you next time. Thanks again, Jake.
Thanks, Jake.
See ya.
Thanks for watching this episode of Unsubscribe, the Demand Drive podcast. If you want less of those nasty unsubscribe emails in your inbox, go ahead and check out some of the content we have to the left, and make sure that you subscribe to Unsubscribe to keep your SDR team in tip-top shape.